I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Welcome to today's episode, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. I have Andrea Tsang Jackson of Third Story Workshop. She is a designer, quilter, pattern writer. She does all the things, and I just have been admiring her work from afar for the last couple years, and um, just am so excited to have her on the show. She's got some really great stuff going on, a new book coming out. She's teaching at QuiltCon. She has public art installation that just went up in her local library, which is so incredible. And we talk a lot about it. So go click on her links in the show notes to check out her website and go see what she's got going on while you listen to the episode and get to know Andrea more. And yeah, let's just get into it. Hi, Andrea. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I know we had to postpone a little bit because you were having some laryngitis and no voice, and that's no fun. So I'm glad you could make it.
Thanks. My voice is back. Maybe not in the full range that I would like, but it's back and I can speak, which is, it was a humbling experience not to be able to do that for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was mentioning to you, I got laryngitis my first year teaching, and it was the worst. Trying to teach third graders with no voices, like it was a zoo. I
I
felt so
can't even
bad.
imagine. I couldn't, like, just in my household, just with a few people, I couldn't, like, say my piece or
Hmm.
give people instructions or, I could only
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah. Unless
Yeah.
you want to sit there writing everything down, that's tiring. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, well, I'm glad you're feeling better and I'm glad you're here because I'm excited to get to know more about you. I've been following your socials and I get your newsletter and all those things, but I just thought it would be so fun to talk with you because you're doing such interesting work and beautiful work. So I'm really glad that you're here to talk about it. But first, I want to ask how you even got into the quilting world in the first place.
Yeah. I started quilting when I was pregnant with my first child in 2011. And I made my first quilt. I didn't know anything about quilting. There was no quilters in my family that I knew about, and that I knew of. And so I went to my local quilt shop. I was living in Ottawa, Ontario at the time, and they set me up with uh, like a quilting ruler, a couple of quilting rulers, and a rotary cutter. I had a cutting mat already from my past, and so yeah, I started there. I designed my own quilt. I come from a design background. I studied architecture and worked in graphics and environmental design. So I knew my way around designing, but I'd
Yeah.
never made a quilt. So I had an idea of what a quilt should look like.
Yeah.
Blocks in a grid with sashing, although I didn't know it was called sashing, with a border and cornerstones. I had very little idea of what any of the terminology. I was just like, I like these shapes, and I chose a palette that was gender neutral. It was like gray with orange and yellow, and I made my first quilt. It was all with print fabrics that I'd found at that shop and kind of at our bigger fabric store,
Mhm.
and yep. And I was like, cool, I made a quilt. I sat around and stitching the binding on while this baby just like was not coming out. I was
Oh
just
no.
like waited for quite a few days before he arrived
Mm.
past his due date. But yep, then I had a quilt. Then I had a baby. And so I made a second quilt when I was pregnant with my second. I started one. I will not say that I finished it. I finished it when he was 15 months old.
Mm.
Um, but that quilt, the second one, was really the one where I felt like, oh, like I could do this for a long time.
Mhm.
I had found uh, solid fabrics in hundreds of shades, Kona
Yeah.
fabrics, which I had no idea what they were called. Again, I was just like looking for the colors that I wanted.
Yeah.
And I had based it on an illustration by Andy Gilmore. And he does digital artwork and does some other artworks. And I was just a derivative. Like I took his design and I kind of simplified it into like 2000 triangles of color.
Sure.
Uh, yeah. And the shades that I could find in my local stores. And
Yeah.
so from there, this little block was an hourglass block, but kind of randomized in color. So I wasn't making repetitions of any block. So I was
Mm,
like cutting 4 triangles and putting them back together. Whereas, an hourglass block, if you know how to make one, you're making a couple at a time, a few
yeah,
at a time. That was not anything that I knew about. I was just like, I
right.
think these triangles in these places, and I'm going to cut triangles and put them together. So it was quite and the blocks ended up being 2 3/4 inches finished or something each, like something
Whoa.
very random.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was really fun. I loved it. It took me a very long time because I had a baby and a toddler.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I didn't have a dedicated sewing space. And so I was hauling up a machine, every maybe a few times a week. For
Yeah.
45 minutes, I had like a 16 patch. I had like a whole booklet, and there was a 16 patch that I would do in that kind of session
Yeah.
and slowly built out this quilt. And
Wow.
it was really, I was like, I loved it. And it was really an outlet for me to have my own time
Mm-hmm.
um, in that period where, there's littles around and they're just kind of all consuming.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where I started. And as the kids got older, um, I was thinking about how I could kind of integrate quilting into maybe something that would make me a little bit of money, just not nothing astronomical, but something where I could kind of get back into a workforce type. So, uh, yeah, so then I started designing. Well, I didn't start designing patterns right away, but I joined my local chapter of the Modern Quilt Guild.
Okay.
Um, from there, very quickly, kind of found people that I was really, that really loved quilting. I'd never met people like this before,
Yeah.
and really passionate about quilting. They asked me if this quilt was made of Kona solids, this like triangles
Yeah.
quilt, and I was like, I don't know what you mean by that, and
Yeah. You're like, sure, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and they're just really encouraging. From there, one of the ladies in the Quilt Guild suggested that we enter our local craft show as a Modern Quilt Guild chapter and kind of showcase our work there. And I was like, oh, cool, I could probably prepare something for that. And then
Yeah.
um, I designed my first gemstone quilt. And then I told her, I was like, actually, I think I have a line of something or other that I might be able to apply on my own with. And so I did, and I got into the show or the juried show, and then I had to make a line of gemstone quilted wall hangings and pillows for that show. And then that's where I started.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, and that was within a couple of months of joining the Quilt Guild.
Wow. That's a
Uh,
fast introduction.
yeah, and so then I had to think of a business name, have like a, an Etsy shop or somewhere where people could land because quilts aren't really an impulse buy.
Right.
Usually people see what this is. But the most astounding thing about that craft show was the interest that people had in talking to me about modern quilting because they had never seen, all this solid fabric and these facets and these kind of geometric shapes. And it was
Yeah.
really new to them seeing quilting in that kind of way. And so that was kind of the biggest takeaway from that show was just people were like, we've never seen this before. That was in 2016. And from there, things I've like meandered and branched out and branched in, like kind of
Yeah.
just really kind of felt my way along of like what fits with me and what do I want to do with this and what am I looking for? And so it's been a really cool journey to today, and it's very, very much not a straight path. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's most creative journeys aren't straight paths. You have an architecture and design background, I have an education background. We didn't just walk into it as like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Well, we're not setting out in university to get a quilting degree, like we end up here by other means usually. And so it's just so cool to hear the different ways that people do end up here in the quilting space and what unique and different perspectives you bring to it. So that's that's so fun that you were able to join your guild and immediately feel supported and encouraged to keep making what you wanted to make, because I think a lot of times guilds can be a scary place for people because they're big and they may not feel so supported. So that's really awesome that you had that.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to those members of the guild who continue to encourage me and just really support what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a gift to have
Yeah.
those friends about. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so
Mhm.
cool. And how did you like, how are you feeling doing that craft show? Like, I know my mom and I have done them before in the past, and it's just like this mad dash and like kind of stressful. So how did that feel as like kind of a newer quilter and then having to bring like your own design into it? And
It was really stressful. It was stressful. I mean, I had a number of pieces that I was aiming to make, and then I didn't have a sales goal because I just really didn't know what would sell, what people would be interested in.
Mhm.
So I made a few of each piece, and they are super tiring preparing for these shows. And so
Yeah.
I haven't done a lot since those first. I've only done a few since then,
Mhm.
and um, I think carefully about which ones I do, because you have to find the right market for the people, like for what you're selling. And this very
Yeah.
modern aesthetic is not for everybody. And even a traditional, aesthetic is not for everybody either. And so where do I fit, and what
Yeah.
shows bring the people in that are interested in what I'm doing? And so there's one particular show here that our provincial craft organization puts on. And it is like paid admission.
Mm,
And all of the people are professional craftspeople that
mm,
participate in this particular show, and that's the audience there pays for craft, like that they are very interested in craft and they invest in it. I know folks who have gone to that show and bought over the years several pieces of the same artist, like a felt artist will have
mhm.
repeat investor collectors come and buy their work. um,
Yeah.
and so it's 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 a different world, and it's like there's not a lot of quilters in that world, in that space in our provincial organization. So I'm one of them.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's interesting to kind of feel it was interesting to feel my way around of who is the audience here.
Yeah.
um yeah, and that's not even to say the audience of quilters that I have as well, who I teach and provide patterns for, um, and things like that. So
Yeah.
that it took me quite a few years to get my head around who's out there, who wants to like buy things from me, for lack of better word, like who's interested in my work, who wants
Yeah.
to pay for a finished quilt, who wants to pay for a pattern. And what
Right.
are those people like, and what do they want? Are they wanting to learn something? Are they, craft collectors? Um, are they really, supporting, they would want to support a local artist, like different things like that. So yeah, so all of these questions I was just exploring, and it was really interesting. But those craft shows were definitely tiring because you're on for like 3 days straight. You're talking to
Yeah.
people all day, um, and selling is tiring. You're not
Yeah.
like actively being like buy my stuff, but you have to put on that face and be like
Yeah.
welcoming, and which is I love doing that. I do really do enjoy connecting with people that way.
Yeah.
But it's like,
It's still a different energy than if you're just like at home sewing by
yes,
yourself and
totally.
listening to a podcast or listening to music while you're just like doing your own thing in your zone. But yeah, when you have to like look outside of yourself to then like engage with other people and like feel their energies and like absorb any of that, you're just like, okay, I need a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you though. I like it too. Like it's really fun in the moment when you're selling and people are buying your stuff. When
Hmm.
nobody's buying your stuff, I hate it. But
Hmm.
this just feels sad. But yeah, when people are like interested in what you made, it's like, oh my gosh, okay, like validates that feeling of like, yeah, I can make good stuff. And then but then on the flip side, if nobody's buying, then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
why doesn't anybody want my stuff?
Yeah. It's like a little layer of rejection, and
Yeah,
it's hard not to take it personally.
it
But
really is.
I constantly have to be like, okay, well, that's not for them, and that's maybe not their price point, or you
Yeah.
know, um, just
Yeah.
it does not, it's not a right fit. I'm here, and they're somewhere out here. We just
Yeah.
didn't meet. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard too, because yeah, well, a finished quilt, it's like it may not be a person's aesthetic, or you don't know because you're like, you might be really into the ultra modern stuff. And then some people are like, well, no, I like more the granny style or like the cottage
Mm.
core, whatever.
Yeah. And
Or
cottagecore was not a thing that back then. It
no.
wasn't. It's very recent,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting to see like kind of the trends flip and change and see what people are interested in, what they're not interested in. And it's a hard whatever craft you have, like it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's quilting or working with wood or felting or whatever it is, like you just never really know. But like sounds like you found a good space and a good, you know, a community that's like, no, yes, this is what we do, and people know that this is what we do and this is what they're here for. And I think those like free open air shows that like are just kind of thrown together can be hard because if people like the vendors are paying to be there, but people can just wander through freely. They're not super invested in making sure that they're shopping every booth and paying attention to what's in every booth and what every vendor has to sell. Cause some of them are just like, oh, I'm selling keychains I ordered off Amazon. I'm like, cool. Well, I made this quilt like with my own two hands.
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's different vibes for sure.
Totally.
But
Yeah. And not like and just not trying to be snobby about it. Like it's just
right.
because, like my price points have to be at where they're at because this is my job. Like I don't have another job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
have to price it like it's that like I'm a professional artist. So
Yeah.
and that's not for everybody, and that's totally fine. I
Mhm.
totally get it if
Yeah.
somebody is making money off making keychains, because that's, either
Yeah.
they may not be making um might not be the main livelihood, but it's
Right.
helping their household income,
Right.
and
Right.
it works for them. And so I
Right.
can't, I'm not blaming anybody or like
No.
pointing
No, no,
fingers.
no.
It's just
No.
different
No, not
strokes
at
for
all.
different folks.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like, yeah, just speaking to like the mixed bag of like sometimes you just don't know what you're gonna see at those kinds of events. And so
Mhm.
whereas, you've found one that has that focus of like these are makers, these are people who do this for professionally and it's everything's handmade and that's the thing that the consumers expect. Like that's kind of nice
Yeah.
to know that. But also there's yeah, again, there's nothing wrong with the other types of craft markets or whatever cuz like I've been successful at all different kinds and I know people find different success with different things. It's just interesting to see like the different crowd and like how people engage with it all. So
Yeah.
it's just humans are interesting. It's just
Very interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Because there's somebody who might come around and see your booth, at 3 different craft shows over Christmas.
Mhm.
Um, and
Yeah.
maybe in that last one we'll buy it. And then there's somebody who just like walks right up to your booth and is like, I'll buy that quilt. Right.
Mhm.
So they sees it for the first time and is like, I'll buy that one. And you're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so you just never know. Or somebody comes back year after year and it's like, finally this year is like the year I can buy something from you. And so
Yeah.
you never tell. You can never tell.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just that exposure that's kind of important too, because people keep seeing it over and over, like, oh, this isn't just like frivolous art, like, or frivolous, not that art is frivolous, but you know what I mean? Like, this isn't just like a one-time thing. This is a lasting, like, heirloom. And I
Mhm.
think the more people kind of see that and that it exists and it's around, like, and yeah, it's an investment. So if you're not, short selling yourself, like crafters and makers can kind of sometimes tend to do,
Mhm.
it is an investment piece because they're not just getting something that was printed in a factory and thrown together at a sweatshop and sold for mass market in a box store. Like they're getting somebody's actual art. And so I think, yeah, just showing up and being present and letting people see what you do and get to know you, I think that almost makes it more important because they're investing their time too by spending time getting to know you and what you do and making that decision to make that investment for themselves. So that's really, yeah, it's important to
Yeah.
just keep showing up in whatever space will let you be there.
Yeah. And that's what I love about like those markets, is connecting with people.
Hmm.
Honestly, I haven't done one for quite a long time, but
Mm.
I'm thinking about I'm always thinking about what's next, and
Yeah.
maybe next year, or I don't know if I come up with a new line of something or other. And sometimes, like, this year I focused on um, a couple of public art pieces, and then a book that I'm writing that's coming out in the early 2025. And so,
Okay.
that kind of production work, like making to sell quilts or quilted items, was not really on my radar. I just didn't have time to do that. And so,
Yeah.
so, this quilt behind me is in the book, and I can see it moving into a wall hanging types, production
Mhm.
maybe next year.
Mhm.
Um, so there's a kind of a bridge between those two worlds of what I teach quilters, or what I have to to show my quilting audience, or like to teach them, or to write books for them or patterns for them. And then
Yeah.
it kind of seeps into the production side of like, oh, could I sell these quilts, kind of thing. And so there's
Mhm.
always that crisscross of these two categories of like the quilting audience and then the general audience. um,
Yeah.
where are the connections there? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. It'll be interesting to see, yeah, how that all comes together once your book is out. And um, so before we get into that, because I do have questions, when did you release your first pattern?
My first pattern. Okay, so my first pattern came out um a little bit less than a year after I joined the my quilt guild. So I
Okay.
had that craft show experience, and in those conversations that I was having at that first craft show, there were quilters shopping there, and they're like, "Do you have patterns of these gemstones?" And
Oh,
I said, "Oh, like I had actually that wasn't my intention, was to actually design patterns for quilters. That was my initial intention of joining the Modern Quilt Guild." Um, but once I got into the show, it was kind of on the back burner. I was just producing
yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
So then I started designing them. So with my architecture background, design background, it was
Mhm.
very quite an easy shift to make in terms of writing verbal instructions and diagrams for people to make things. It was just the same thing as
Yeah.
what an
Right.
architect did,
Yeah.
just on a smaller scale. And you don't have control over, or you don't talk to the other person on the other end who's receiving these instructions, which is
Yeah.
also not unlike an architects and contractors like relationship sometimes. But
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, because it's like I think I released them on Craftsy and on Etsy. Um, and uh, it was funny. I released them maybe in January, February, can't remember, of 2017. And there were gemstones. There was 4 different gemstones, just block patterns, 12-inch
Mhm.
blocks. And that year, at QuiltCon, the best in show was called Bling, and it was a 90-inch by 90-inch princess cut diamond that Kat Jones had made she's from Tanzania.
Mhm.
I hope that's the right place. Anyway, Kat Jones, Bling, Best in Show 2017. And so there was this excitement around gemstones in quilting. And so a few months later, I got an email from Suzanne Woods, late Suzanne Woods of Lucky Spool Media, and
Mhm.
she said, "Gemstones are trending in quilting. Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I was like, "What?"
Mm.
I had thought about it, like maybe 3, 5, 10 years down the line. Um, but I was like, "What?"
Yeah. You're like,
And
no.
so, yes, I guess, but not like tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Not
uh,
today.
yeah. So, because it was a trend, she wanted to push it through pretty quickly. And so,
Yeah.
um, the second half of 2017, was it 2017? Maybe it was 2018 by that time. Any case, it was so long ago.
Yeah. Right. That feels like a
It all
lifetime
just
ago
like
now.
bled together. Anyway,
Yeah.
I put together all of my stuff within 6 to 9 months, like the patterns and all, like the writing of the book patterns, and making the samples and stuff like that. It was a very squished timeline.
Wow.
Um, but it came out in the fall of 2019.
Okay.
And so yeah, that was my like first crash course into writing a book, and it was uh kind of wild, but great. Like Lucky Spool was really great about having the author's voice show through. Like when I had thought about, before ever talked to Suzanne Woods, I
Yeah.
was like, if I ever write a book, it would be really nice to write it with Lucky Spool, because their authors, like the aesthetic is right, the modern quilting aesthetic is right, like the way the photographs are and the way that the patterns are designed. It just really, really, the author's voice was really so clear. Like if
Mhm.
you go to it with a bigger publisher, there's some formulas that they follow,
Yeah.
which work well with their books. And so Lucky Spool was small enough that you could kind of bespoke everything. not everything, but you have to like help select the photographer and, you know, come up with a mood board to to guide the design of the book. And so I was really pleased to work with them, and the book like turned out how I expected it to turn out. And so
Yeah.
marketing books is a very hard. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Um,
sure.
but it was, yeah, it was great to work with Suzanne. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with her before she passed away, because she passed away shortly after the book came out.
Mm.
But yeah, that was kind of my foray into writing books. But I didn't really think about doing it again because it was such a whirlwind. And I was
Mhm.
like, what am I going to write about next? Like, I don't know.
Right.
Um, so, you know, now over 5 years later, the first one coming out, I have a second one coming out. And it's very, very different from that gemstone quilting book. The gemstone quilting book was a traditional craft book in that, you know, there's patterns.
Mhm.
You see the photograph of the finished quilt and you're making that thing. I'm
Yeah.
telling you how to make that thing step by step. Your templates are all there, and like, and you know, it's oh yeah, you would know teacher words like didactic. Like,
Yeah.
here's what you're doing, follow the
Yeah.
steps, and you'll get there.
Mhm.
The second book is much more exploratory, and there's a lot more writing. So there's reading. There's 5 essays in the front. In the front, the first half of the book is essays
Mhm.
about quilting. Like, why do we do it? How do we fit it into our lives? Why is it important to us? Um, I would say in some ways it was a little indulgent,
Mm.
in that I could just like write about whatever I was thinking or have been thinking
Yeah.
about for the last 8 years or whatever it was, the last
Mhm.
number of years, just why quilting um is important to me as a creative person,
Yeah.
as a group, as a collective craft that's unique to quilting. Not that
Mhm.
other craft forms and art forms don't have a collective aspect to it, but you can, anybody who you say the word quilter to or quilting to has an idea in their head that there's a bunch of usually women in a
Mhm.
like church basement or something, and they're quilting together, right?
Right.
um there's that. It's very natural for us to understand quilting in that sense.
Mhm.
um and that tradition continues online and in person. And
Mhm.
so like, what's that all about? Like, why is it so collective? And um so yeah, the first part of the book is those kinds of thinking, like, what's the approach here?
Mhm.
um and then the second half is projects, which are projects that I wanted to try. So
Yeah.
I was asking questions. So the way it's structured is each one is, there's 5 of them. They're called quests. And so I'd start with a question. Like for this one here, like, how does drawing translate into fabric, into quilting?
Mhm.
Um, and so I kind of drag you along on the journey of like, what did I find out?
Yeah.
Or how did I do this? Or what, this particular one, the genesis was a 100-day project that I had done a couple of years ago with
Okay.
drawing like an ink on index cards, like just
Okay.
really quick
Mhm.
drawings. And then they kind of evolved into these patterns here, or these motifs here.
Mhm.
And then how did I like go about figuring that out? How does that come together? So there's
Yeah.
exercises on like line and just trying to figure out, explore like different techniques of making a line in quilting. Of course, there's like 1,000 ways you can make a line in quilting.
Right.
You can
Right.
stitch it, you can stitch it by machine, you can stitch it by hand, you could like applique a strip on, you could, insert a strip, or there's like a million ways you could do it.
Right.
But I give you a few to try out, and then you can try them, or you can just read that and not try it. You can jump right into making one of these blocks, or you
Mhm.
could eventually make a quilt of whatever size you want to. So it's not like I have, 4 sizes of this quilt that you can make, and here are the fabric requirements.
Right.
Really, when I made this quilt, it was like, what kind of off-white scraps do I have? Do I need to use out? Because I have a lot of them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
a lot of these, they're actually kind of mismatched, these whites.
Mm.
Um, but so I don't give you like a exact fabric requirement, but I give
That's
you
it. Yeah.
the kind of a blueprint of how you might be able to go about making your own.
Yeah.
I just rambled on for a
No,
while, but
no, that's great. Cause
yeah.
I think quilting is an exploration and it is a series of questions that we ask ourselves. Like, we might initially see something that's visually striking and go, do I want to make that? No. Okay. Well, how can I interact with it in a way that, you know, is meaningful to me? Or am I going to continue to interact with this image or this visual? Or, it's like there's just so many questions flying around whenever we see things that are visually striking. And so giving people kind of a scaffolding of sorts to build their own is, I think, important in that sense of like if people want to branch out and get a little more, you know, messy with it in the sense of like humanness is messy, right? We try
Mhm.
things and we see how it works out. And if we fail, then we figure out a solution. And if we succeed, then we figure out what we did right so we can continue that. And it's no different in quilting. And so digging into who you are as a person and knowing yourself enough to know, like, oh, that's my limit and I don't want to ever make a quilt like that again. Or, I'm comfortable right here in this space because this is where I can like do mind numbing, like purposefully, like in a good way, kind of like I can just chain piece and I don't have to think about anything that's going on right now because I need this time for me. Or it can be a very thoughtful experience of digging in and exploring your own new limits and pushing yourself to learn new skills. So I love that because I think it's inherent within quilting itself that we find out more about ourselves and ask a million questions.
Mhm. You just like basically summed up my book. So
Oh,
yeah.
well, here we go. That's great. Everybody
Yeah.
buy it. It's great.
Yeah.
So it's called Quilting: A Journey to Self.
We've changed the subtitle since.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be called, it is called Quilting, a modern creative journey through an age-old craft.
Okay. A
Yeah.
modern creative journey through an age-old craft.
Yeah. Yeah. Now
Gorgeous.
it's been like registered with the libraries of some of on high. I don't even know where it gets registered.
The library's
Uh,
on high.
yeah.
Okay.
Um,
A
yeah.
modern creative journey through an age-old craft.
Yeah.
I'm
Choosing a
writing it down.
subtitle. Like I
Yeah.
don't, it was like, the publisher figures out these things, right? It At first I was like, this is just a mishmash of like keywords. And actually that's exactly what they want, what it needs to like be searchable. And
Yeah. I was like, isn't that kind of what they look for?
yeah. I'm like, oh, I don't like this because it just feels like, you know, keywords. But at the same time, nope, that's what it is, what it is. Because it's
Yeah.
my modern creative journey.
Hmm.
And I just kind of bring you along and see, like, does this fit for you? Like, does this work for you? When we talked about just kind of doing kind of like mindless piecing sort of
Hmm.
thing. I made a quote like that a couple weeks ago. And at certain points in your life, that's what you need. That's what you need to
Hmm.
do is someone else to
Absolutely.
tell you exactly what fabric to use, exactly
Yeah.
how to cut it, exactly how many pieces you need. No
Yeah.
figuring out necessary.
Yeah.
I used a jelly roll, which I've never used like a full jelly roll.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like the fabric all went together. I didn't choose any of the fabric other than chose a jelly roll because my friend was getting rid of it.
Hmm.
Um, and because at certain times in your life, you just don't have the energy or you can't put your energy towards figuring out like what this is, right? So,
Right.
um, so quilting fills so many of those kind of gaps in our lives or like
Yeah.
has a purpose in different ways. Even for the same person, like
Hmm.
sometimes I really want to do something completely wacky
Hmm.
and I have to go down a like rabbit hole of YouTube videos to be like, is this possible? Like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Ask like a bunch of people, like, how'd you do this? Or um, sort of thing. Or just get that free pattern from whatever
Yeah.
fabric manufacturer and get
Right.
that jelly roll. And because, sometimes, you might have family obligations, something you need to take care of, or your job is really stressful. And that time is not for you to be the quilting time in that season of your life is for you to kind of rejuvenate for the other aspects of your life that need your attention and energy. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's exactly what the book's about.
Yeah. That's perfect. I love that because I think, yeah, like you said, there's quilting can show up for you in so many different ways. And at different times, and it is such an expansive medium to work in because there's like, yeah, it's fabric and sewing, but there's, like you're proving just with that quilt behind you, like there's so many different things you can do with it. You
Mm.
can use drawing concepts within quilting. You can use kind of just all these different ideas that you can bring together and still make a quilt. You still are quilting, you're still a quilter.
Yeah.
But it also can bring in so many different aspects of different types of art, different types of mediums and ways of expressing, what's going on with in your life at the time. And so it's really cool to see kind of more people leaning into that part of quilting, because before, like for me especially, like it's just like, oh, I want to just play with all this pretty fabric and I want pretty quilts, and
Mhm.
that's great. And then I turned it into a business and monetized my hobby, which I still use it as a hobby, but I've like I've explored quilting in ways I never would have on my own because other people are asking me to make things that I would have never thought to make. Or they're saying, I really want this concept. And then it allows me to create things that I wouldn't have created for myself, but I still get to have this artistic expression and find creative ways to bring their vision to life. And so it's been really interesting to see how that's all come about for me, and that personal exploration again of like, what are my limits? What am I willing to say yes to? What do I absolutely going to say no to?
Mhm.
And how, like, where are my skills at, and like where's my head at? Sometimes I say no to a project that maybe 6 months later I might have said yes to, but at the same time, like I can't know those things in those moments. And so just having to be okay with that too is like a different
Yeah,
thing.
and, not think that that chance has, passed you by and you'll never get that chance again.
Right.
It will come back around again,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a weird snowball effect of, um, when you make something that resonates with you,
Mhm.
then somebody else asks you to make something similar because it resonates with them, and then you
Right.
kind of build this, um, I don't know, this way of of speaking, like your own voice in what you're doing, because you're like, oh yeah, like we're talking about the same language, we're speaking the same language. And
Yeah.
then the next person says like, I like that too, like, but I want, I'm thinking about this. So um back before, other than the gemstones, I have
Mhm.
always said like I don't work in series. I'm like a serial hobbyist. Like I asking questions, but I never make the same thing twice.
Right.
But if I look back over the last 5 years,
Mhm.
actually, I have made a series of things, and that actually all go together, um, and built on this one particular quilt that I made. Should I delve into the story of it, maybe? I
Yeah,
could.
yeah.
Yeah. So I made a quilt based on a building in Newfoundland,
Mhm.
on the far east coast of Canada. And it is a very modern piece of architecture. It's an artist studio on
Mhm.
Fogo Island. And so I made that, and somebody bought it,
Mhm.
now a friend in Toronto, a person I didn't know before, but we connected over this quilt. And since then, I've made um, more abstractions of buildings than than I thought I ever would. So I think I'm on number 5 at this
Wow.
point. Yeah.
Wow.
So um, yeah, mostly in black and white. There's one that was in kind of muted earthy colors.
Okay.
But yeah, I keep making those.
Yeah.
And at the time, actually, when I made that first one, I was paired up with a mentor here, a local artist named Frances Dorsey, and she's a weaver.
Mm.
Um, and she's a great teacher, retired professor at the art school here. And she was like, yeah, I could see you making more of these, like kind of like objects in a landscape is what she kind of called it, just like in like
Mm.
the sparsest number of words,
Yeah.
objects and landscapes. Um, yeah, but like in a be extremely modern, like,
Yeah.
5 or 6 fabrics. That was it.
Yeah.
White background, like,
Mhm.
off-white background.
Yeah.
Um, and she was right. I was like, yep, I could do this again and again.
Yeah. What about it do you think resonates with you so much?
Um, it's so many things actually.
Mhm.
Now that I think about it, now that you've asked me this question, it's like it's a reduced palette, so like in a grayscale,
Mhm.
and it's reduced in its simplified forms. So if you were to think about a building, I'm trying to think of a building. The first rent one that I made was basically like a tall rectangular 3-story,
Mhm.
like rectangular prism with
Yeah.
like a bottom corner lopped off.
Oh, okay.
But of course, the architecture is much more complex than that. Like the door has to fit in there somewhere.
Right.
Like, there's like shingles, not shingles, actually. I think it's paneling and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
like the architecture becomes quite, even though it's quite minimal and the form is very striking, I kind of reduced it back to its like concept drawing, basically.
Yeah.
And so I really like kind of simplifying those kinds of things and like kind of having a diagram of it in a way.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that's appealing to me. So reducing the palette, reducing the form,
Mhm.
and then flattening it into a quilt, but then also
Yeah.
having the dimension of a quilt. Um, and rendering, this is what appealed to me about the gemstones too, is like rendering something that's hard and
Mhm.
something soft into something that's soft using a
Yeah.
soft material. And so I've had to fight with fabric a little bit. Like I draw them in the computer first. And so I'm like,
Okay.
oh, these lines are so straight and like perfect shape and everything. And then I go to make it and it's like a little wobbly.
Right.
It
Yeah.
stretches a little funny. So I've come to terms with how that all goes down.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just those things kind of appeal to me about um, kind of very reduced architectural forms
Yeah.
and a limited palette. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and like yeah, I like it.
Do you think it gives you a different insight on simplifying it because you know the like complexity and the like the hard skills that go into it of
You mean
like
on the
design?
architecture side?
Yeah, on the architecture side.
Um, it taps into something that I naturally quite um what I what I do love about architecture is that it's the idea of it
Mm.
and not necessarily the details that I really
Okay.
latch onto. I think
Yeah.
with age that my perspective has shifted a little bit, but that's what really interested me in architecture was like the concept of like what's the point of this building? Like what's the idea that it's trying to convey? Not just in its shape, but like how it might relate to where it is in the city or how people will use it.
Yeah.
Like the idea behind the building, not the building
Itself.
the details of itself.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
being able to express that in quite a pure form,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's what appeals to me about architecture is the ideas.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, because it's like I think as a person that is just interacting with the building, there's like I just have to go here. Like you don't think about the story behind it or the purpose of like where that design came from. And so I think being able to interpret it in a different way is probably just like allowing you to then interact with it in a different way too
Mhm.
and interpret that for people, which is so cool because like I love architecture. I don't know anything about it. I mean, but I love seeing the unique shapes of buildings and the way that, you know, the cantilever kind of setups that happen and like this summer I was in Amsterdam for a few days and there in the neighborhood we stayed in there was this big apartment building and it was kind of like what you're saying had just like a corner lopped off but that was like where you went into the lobby of the building and then it was also cantilever at the top and I was like this building is blowing my mind. And so but yeah, it's like if you look at it just kind of blurred vision like out of the corner of your eye it is just like all these different shapes like
Mhm.
just simple shapes if you break it down and it's just still so like interesting and mind-blowing. So that's
Yeah,
really cool.
I'm working on one design right now for a lady, and it's her house, maybe a second house, I'm not sure. But the photos she sent me, they're her family, or yeah, I think it's her family. They're on the porch, they're eating in the
Mm.
dark, like at nighttime.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, to me, actually, I haven't told her this, but to me, that porch is really important because
Mhm.
if she sent me that picture of the 7 pictures that she sent me of her house, um, that gathering place is
Yeah.
a really important part of that house for them. And
Yeah.
so being able to express that and really capitalize on that feature and make that stand out, or make that be a really important part of this reduced form of her house.
Yeah.
Uh, it makes you think. You're like, oh, okay, like it's not just the porch. It's actually where
Right.
all the things happen. Like, I can
Yeah.
imagine, I made up a story about why they were on the porch that night in the summer. And they do this every year. And it's somebody's birthday. And um yeah. And so yeah, those kind of moments and those spaces that I can hopefully interpret correctly.
Yeah.
I could talk to her about it. But be able to bring that out in a quilts design,
Yeah.
I think is really special.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. And giving that a prompt, like making that porch have prominence, whereas somebody else might not see that, or
Yeah.
just like understand that that's an important piece. But being able to bring that to life, that's so cool. Yeah. I just love quilting. I love all
Yeah.
the things that it can do and show and express, and it's really so cool. And I actually, this thought just popped in my head again. It did earlier, but anyway, your gemstones. I actually had a client reach out to me and was like, "Can you make this quilt?" And they sent me like a cover image of your book, and I was like, "Yeah, I can." She never ended up hiring me, but it was just like she was really gung ho. And that's what happens on Etsy too. I don't know if you've experienced that, but people will be like, "I really want this thing," and I'm like, "Great, I'm here for it. Here's like what my estimate is. Like I can send you like the official itemized estimate, we can approve it and we can get to work." And then it's like I never hear from them again. And
Yeah.
so anyway, so I was at one point going to be making that gemstone
Oh,
quilt, but
the circle, like the one that has like
Mhm.
in a circle
Yeah,
formation. Yeah, I love that
yeah,
one.
it's so
You know,
beautiful.
do you know the story behind that quilt?
No.
Okay. Um, that quilt, okay, so for the gemstone book, I really wanted to make a birthstone like family tree,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
like I give you all the colors to make the various birthstones throughout the year
Yeah.
for each month. Um, and then I was like trying to structure it like a tree and like stuff. And then I was like, this is nobody's family fits into this. Like, how can this
Right.
be choose your own adventure? Like it's really quite difficult. So
Yeah.
it's called Family Circle, and it represents the people in your family. You can make it with 4, 6, 8, 9, or 12 gemstones around the center round stone. Like they're up, if I'm gonna explain it. It's like they're like a petal shaped or like leaf shaped gemstones that come out from this circular stone.
Hmm.
Um, and so that people have choice about who they want to include in that, in the honor in those birthstones. They can put maybe whoever they're making it for, their birthstone in the middle.
Hmm.
Or if it's for themselves, they can put their own birthstone in the middle. But that will give people the options of like, it wasn't so much the family structure that was important, but just like who's important in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. Cause yeah, I just literally, she just showed, like, sent me an image, like a screenshot of the cover, like the book cover. And I was like, I mean, yeah, I'm a sewist. Like I can sew that. That's fine. And,
Yeah.
so yeah, but it's like, it keeps popping in my head ever since like she brought it up. Cause I'm like, that would be so fun to make that, or just make gemstone blocks. Cause like, yeah, I don't have my own kids, but I have step kids, but like, they're the most important two boys in the whole wide world to me, besides like my nephew. And
Mhm.
um so yeah, just thinking about like, it's not a tree for me because they're not my blood, they're not genetic to me. So like, having a different way to express that is just so cool. And I did think about that concept, but I didn't know that that's like what that was representing. So that's really cool. And I love that. And now I just want to make it for myself. So
Yeah. Do you like paper piecing?
I do, yeah. I
Yeah.
I was so scared of it for so long, but I've done so much of it recently, and I really just love it. I love the preciseness of it, and I love the like kind of color by number situation. And
Yeah.
um I've made some of my early stuff that I was just like, I mean, I guess I can make it. And it's, again, it's client projects, whereas like I was too scared to do it for myself, but when somebody was like, "I'll hire you," I'm like, "All right,
Guess I'm
I'll do
figuring this
my."
out now.
Yeah, and I made lightsabers. It's like,
Oh, cool.
was so hard. But I did it and it looked great and everybody was happy. So I think just like being able to explore with it a little bit. And for some reason, it feels safer to like do it for a person who's paying me to do it than if I just do it for myself, which seems backwards. But I think almost like because I want to do a good job for my clients and because I'm invested in making sure it happens for them, like I'm more devoted to like really putting all of my energy into that. Whereas if it's for me, I'm like, yeah, I'll do it some other time. I'll do it some other
Mhm.
time. I can just keep putting it off because I don't have a real purpose behind it. So it's been
Um,
honestly so great. But anyway.
that's really cool. I was thinking about one of the concepts in my book is in my new book
Mhm.
is building containers. So for
Mm.
yourself. So how do I explain that? Well, I already explained it in the book, but
You really
how do
just read the
I
book, okay?
uh like when you put a box around something,
Yeah.
like maybe that client, like a client, tasks you to do something, you put it in this box, like it's much easier to go through with it.
Yeah.
Because it has a space, you've made a space for it.
Yeah, it has
Um,
parameters.
yeah, exactly. It has parameters and um, it's not again with when you do it for yourself, it's kind of boundless. It's like,
Yeah.
how am I going to fit this in when I
Yeah.
feel like it? Or like there's no purpose or driving force behind it. But if
Mhm.
you put it in this little container and you put parameters around it, whether it's, the time limit that you have with your client, it pushes you um,
Mhm.
to accomplish something or
Yeah.
move forward with something.
Yeah,
So um, yeah,
for
I
sure.
really resonated with what you just said about how like your clients push you to do like to
Yeah.
do things you wouldn't normally do for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's so cool. Yeah, and I didn't even think of it that way, but yeah, it's like I have a space for that creative energy to go, and so I can focus in on that because it's all right there for me. It's like I know the
Hmm.
project, I know what it's for, I know who it's for. Most of the time, the client picks out all the colors and all the things. I don't have to think about it too hard. And then there's a time when it's like a little more free. There's still a box, right? There's still a container because it's for someone else,
Hmm.
but I but then I'm still within that those parameters of like designing this thing for someone and it has a purpose. And so that's
Hmm.
interesting. That's kind of cool and it makes all the sense in the world. So
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Uh, When I used to talk about I used to get really weird about like designer versus artist or crafty
Mhm.
person or like quilter or like these terms.
Yeah.
And one of the things I used to talk about in my very first trunk shows that I ever presented, like 6 years ago or more, um, was that a blank canvas always like freaks me out. Like
Mm-hmm.
the idea that you could just make anything you want, anything at all. It just like, I don't know where to go forward with this.
Yeah.
So I would use the example of like having a client tell me, okay, well, it's going to be a wall hanging. So it's going to be this size. The theme
Hmm.
is woodland nursery. Let's talk about like my sleepy fox pattern.
Yeah.
And it has to be this size, these colors. So once you kind of start like you're making these boxes and
Hmm.
then you're making them all fit together and then you have like that focus. You can move forward, you can take those steps and it's so what that's what a designer does is like they take all the parameters of a client or the needs of a community or something
Yeah.
and they're kind of slowly coming in like focusing coming into focus as a solution to whatever
Hmm.
problems at hand. And so I love using that, yeah, to just mold the direction that I'm going in. And yeah, it just like when I could do whatever I wanted, like, or if I can do whatever I want, just like, well, it's freaky. Like,
Yeah.
it's paralyzing.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't thrive when I have full free reign, but when I
Mhm.
have at least a little bit of direction, then it's like I can at least get started. I can at least have something like a stone to step on to move forward. Otherwise, I'm like, there's no way I can make it across this bridge. Like, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's almost like those boxes coming together and coming up with that solution or that design concept is like I need those and I need boxes to check as I move through. It's like
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people operate that way and maybe not in the exact same way, but it's like we all have like our kind of needs as far as like what we need to get started in that creative space and
Yeah.
whatever
And
it looks like.
for some people, it might be time as a parameter.
Mhm.
Like, I only have 5 minutes today, or
Yeah.
you know, and that creates a different box, but you get to focus that 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So you put a little box around it and then
Mhm.
you can do it. Whereas you're like, I'll get to it sometime.
Right.
You haven't really bound it. You're just it's like flapping in the wind.
Yeah.
It's like you'll never get around to it. But if
Yeah.
you're like, no, this is my hour this week, or this is you know, my weekend this month, or my day this
Mhm.
month, or whatever.
Yeah.
When you put that time parameter around it, it seems much more doable. I think that's why like 100-day project works pretty well, because you're putting all those parameters in place. And so
Yeah.
you just have to like show up
Mhm.
and not worry about the outcome either, but you're making those little boxes for yourself to be like, I'm here
Yeah.
and I have the tool that I picked and the materials that I'm using, um and you can make creative progress that way.
Yeah. And there's no pressure to like do anything very specific either. You're
Yeah.
just there and whatever comes out. And just it's all yeah, that habit of showing up and producing something is I think beneficial in that realm of like you can sit down and you can give yourself certain things and come out with something new and different each time. So
Mhm.
that's so cool. I've never done a 100-day project, but I've seen
I've
them and
never gotten I've never gotten to 100 days, frankly, but
no. Well, I
yeah.
think ultimately, like we all get what we need to get out of things. And
Hmm.
whether it's the goal of just like finishing something, sometimes people really need that. Or if you got what you needed out of the 47 days that you participated or it showed up, like I think, I think, like you were saying, like with the terms, like being really kind of stingy with like what you call yourself or what you say you're doing, or like terms are important and vocabulary, like the way we interact with those terms is important. But I think ultimately, like we can all have, um, like what Brene Brown says, she says we can all be slashies. Like you can be a quilter slash designer slash sewist slash, whatever, like artist. You can be all those things, and you know, be mindful not to just throw them around loosely, but at the same time, like building that habit of being all those things at all the time, and being okay with whatever hat you're wearing at the time. It's like
Hmm.
it's just
Yeah.
interesting. Like people get really like the sewer versus sewist kind of debate. I'm like, I don't want sewer sounds fine, but on paper it looks disgusting. Like it looks like
It does.
sewer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the plight of the American language is synonym or not homophones and like words that look different on paper, but they sound or they look the same on paper and sound different. Sorry. I'm like, I haven't taught for a few years, if you can't tell. I'm like used to be able to just like rattle this stuff off immediately. Um, but yeah, just that concept of like, if you want to call yourself a designer and you're designing things, then you're a designer. And if you say you're an artist because you're creating art pieces with quilts, then you're an artist. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think we can even tell each other what we're doing. Like,
No, I don't think so either. And yeah, you just have to figure it out for yourself.
yeah,
And also maybe not figure it out for yourself, but just be okay with that.
yeah,
Like if you need to be a part of, you know, a show or a community, and need to be seen a certain way, and you're okay with calling yourself X,
yeah,
well, that's fine too. Like when I talk to
yeah,
quilters, I say I'm a quilter. And
yeah,
I'm not like I'm a quilt artist or like or an artist or a textile artist. I'm like a quilter. I'm just like you. I make quilts. Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's not, you know. So
yeah.
it's often
Context.
for me, it's like content, contextual. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, who am I talking to? What would they
Hmm.
resonate with? Because I don't really care. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Same. It's like, yeah, I make quilts. I mean, whatever that sounds like and looks like to you, that's fine with me because at the end of the day, the end result is the same. I make quilts. And so sometimes I'm a designer and sometimes I'm just a maker. I just make the damn quilt. Like I don't have a lot of my own personality or my own self going into it besides just my physical skill.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
which is fine. I mean,
Yeah. And
that's what
it's
I'm
like,
here for.
yeah, it's joyful. Like you're like,
Yeah.
I'm getting so much out of this,
Yeah.
even though
Like I
you're my
get to build my
creative
skills.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Creatively, you're not necessarily putting yourself creatively into it, but you're creating
Hmm.
something um, from somebody else's instructions and
Yeah.
fabric choices. And that's also brings about satisfaction.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's fun sometimes. It's a nice little break, and again, like let's for me, lets me do things that I wouldn't normally do, or, a quilt I might have admired from afar and been like, that's really beautiful. And but it's not, it's like not in my project list per se necessarily. And then somebody's like, hey, I want you to make this for me. Here's all the fabric. Here's how I want it quilted. And I'm like, awesome. This is so great because then I can make this quilt and not feel like, oh, I'm just making another thing for myself while at the same time interacting with this pattern or this quilt that I've admired from afar and get to still play with it, which is super fun. So
Mm.
it's fun being in kind of like wearing all the different hats of in the quilting world and just letting it be what it is, like not feeling any sort of way or any sort of like loyalty to one title or another.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it is freeing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
just lets you exist in it and yeah, find the joy in it. Cause I think if we get so hung up on the words of it, we miss out on the joy aspect of it of like, but how do you feel when you're doing this? Like, do you feel good about yourself when you're telling me like you will call me a sewist and not a sewer? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
but like how like you're cutting yourself off from me now and from the joy of just sewing. Like it's okay.
Mhm.
And like I'm 100% on the sewist train. So don't get me wrong. Like I think because of how it looks when it's
Yeah,
written
it
out, I
just
don't like it.
no. It's sewist, sewer, so yeah, sewists make sewist. I'm glad it's a term now.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
before it was
Because we're
like,
artists. We're,
yeah,
you know, I mean, there's so many different, I don't know.
crafter, creative,
Yeah.
creator,
Then there's maker, there's quilter. You
maker,
don't say
yeah.
quiltist or makeist. Like, I don't
Hmm.
know. It's like
It's fine.
again, like you can get so
Just
hung up on it
words.
and the grammar of it, but that
It's
doesn't
just
change.
words.
Yeah. It doesn't change
Mhm.
what you do or how you do it. So the approach is there and that's so cool. So,
Mhm.
okay. So your book is coming out early 2025. So we'll watch for that, your new book. And then I want to talk about your installation at the library
Okay, sure.
because that is I think I watched like the installation videos that you posted like 25 times each because I was just like mind blown by it. So how did that even come about?
Yeah, so I in the last few years have always had a mind towards how can textiles exist in public spaces.
Hmm.
So in my architecture world, I had seen artists install things on buildings, like building scale type artwork. And I was
Yeah.
really fascinated by that. And I was like, well, why aren't there like there'd be photographs? You could probably imagine like photographs, like not printed onto buildings, but like installed
Yeah.
onto buildings or those kinds of things. And I was like, well, how can textiles participate in this? Because textiles are so associated with home and the
Yeah.
domestic world. Um, in a public space, they can be seen as delicate. They're more light sensitive than other materials
Hmm.
um, can be if you don't have the right kinds and things like that. So I was like, oh, like looking for opportunities to be able to express textiles in public spaces. So I've been looking for public art projects to work on and like be able to translate textile media into public art.
Mm.
And this particular commission came, well, a lot of them come through requests for like RFPs and
Hmm.
RFQs. So procurement processes that, government or other organizations put forth. And so I apply to a few whenever they come up and they seem like a good fit.
Yeah.
And so this one was for the library. Um, and how did I brought my kids to that library branch when they were little. It's like the
Hmm.
best. It's such a nice library. It's a local branch, like it's not like a central one, like a downtown one. It's a
Uh-huh.
community. Um, but it's always been a nice building, lots of glass and like the the structure of the kind of the architectural concept of the building was like a forest. So like the columns
Okay.
would come up and then they would like branch out into these. And that
Mm.
was like the structure that held up a roof, and then there was like glass all the way around it,
Oh,
basically.
wow.
Yeah. But like a one-story building, nothing big.
Yeah.
So with they were renovating this branch, it's like over 20 years old now. Um, And with I think most all, maybe all municipal projects in Halifax have to have a percentage allotted to public art.
Mm.
So some libraries or some projects will have, like 6 different spots that they want something in. So there's like, they kind of divide the pot of money up into 6 different artists, or like 6 different spots in the library, like maybe a sculpture outside, maybe at the front desk there's something like a mosaic on the front of the desk or something.
Yeah.
This one they just put it all in one bucket, which was the children's area.
Okay.
It's a little playhouse on the side. It's like a 2-story playhouse, which the kids
Mm-hmm.
love. They like
Mm-hmm.
round the corner, they have this like look, and I'm like, oh, they love the artwork. They don't really care about the artwork. They're just like, playhouse.
Yeah.
Stairs inside this playhouse. Anyway, um, so what I'm trying to think of how the idea came about. Oh yes. Okay, the original building had these like tree-like structures that held up the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And the renovation, the kind of architectural concept around the renovation was modern forest. And so they repainted these in black. They repainted all of like the exposed ductwork white. They
Hmm.
had these colors that were already kind of picked for the upholstery and like all the built-in furniture and things like that in the carpet. There's like these cool grassy patches of carpet that are on the floor in the children's area. The lighting fixtures were like felt, but like cloud-like with little star lights, and really beautiful. Like,
Cute. Yeah.
yeah. And so I was thinking about textiles and thinking about forest and looking at old pictures of the forest behind the library.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was like how the light comes through the leaves in the forest, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
sparkle. There's like a specific Japanese word, komorebi, that
Mm.
describes this phenomena. Like, I guess in English you would say like dappled sunlight or something like
Okay. Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But komorebi literally means sunlight leaking through the trees.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can imagine like that
Yeah.
image, right? It's really striking.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, thinking about textiles, and like, so lace came to mind. Like, how does
Mm.
lace, like if you're pulling it through like to a light source, like how the
Yeah.
shadows play and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so lace became kind of the textile that I explored. I went through like deep dive into like handmade lace,
Yeah.
how to make it. I tried to make some large scale lace like with ropes so that I could see where all the threads were going.
Yeah.
Um, it was really fun to just learn all about lace. I took a couple of lectures at the Lace Museum. I think they're in California. There's like a couple of online
Oh.
lectures that I took, just about the history of lace or the language of lace. Um, and so lace comes through in a whole bunch of different ways. I don't know if you, as a teacher, if you're familiar with Amelia Reggio. It's like an early childhood education kind of approach. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Montessori, but it's not Montessori. It's also
Yeah.
from Italy, but it's not
Yeah.
but it's not Montessori. But one of the tenets of that particular approach is the 100 languages of children. So how children communicate just comes out in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Um, whether it's spoken through drama, through gestures, through painting or drawing or playing, or like
Mm-hmm.
playing with shadows, or how they express themselves. And so, or how they communicate. And so I thought of different materialities for lace. How could that be expressed and how could that be tactile? Because it is in the kids area.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that they asked for, was how you connect it with like early childhood education.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I don't know if we mentioned this, but I did do an education degree in arts and
Mm.
education. And so that's why I know about this Reggio Emilia approach.
Okay.
And so I was trying to think of different ways of expressing lace. And so it ended up being that there was a few ways. One of them was on the walls. I drew a bunch of textile, a bunch of lace on my iPad, and like manipulated the images digitally to kind of
Mhm.
come up with a landscape. So it looks like hills of
Uh-huh.
different kinds of lace. Um, and then another thing was these there was 3 carved lace bookmarks. I found a book that was like how to make lace bookmarks. It was like a English type of lace called Bedfordshire lace.
Mm.
And so I redrew some of those. I kind of abstracted them, did a bunch of testing with my fabricator, and basically they CNC'd those lace drawings onto plastic, like acrylic panels that were painted green. And then when you carve it, it's white that shows
Oh
through.
yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really tactile, like kids can touch it and like really just like, it's really fun to just follow your finger through where these threads would go.
Yeah.
Um, and, and those became tree trunks, kind
Mhm.
of these 3 bookmarks, as well as like these kind of 3D stitches that look like they kind of go in and out of the wall. Also very tactile.
Mhm.
And then up above where you can't touch it, about 9 feet up, is like a lace canopy. So it's made from a Tyvek material, which is
Okay.
Tyvek we use in buildings, which
Mhm.
you would know about mostly, most common use for it. This particular type of Tyvek is softer. It's more like fabric.
Okay.
So it's like drapier. People use it for, I think, like for tents and like kites and stuff.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So that's cut out in these leafy lace-like kind of drapes that hang above. And then like I worked with a lighting designer to have those lit so that there's shadows on the wall through all this lace.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there was a lot of different components to it. So that
Yeah.
was the main things. And the interactivity for the kids was really important. So in the drawings on the wall, it's
Mhm.
printed on vinyl that's like installed into the wall. There's these little hidden images. So there's 20 little like objects that they
Oh.
can find. Like there's a basketball, there's like a couple of music notes, there's a cell phone that's hidden somewhere, a lollipop,
Mm.
and like
Yeah.
different hockey stick.
Oh my
Mm,
gosh.
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really cool project to work on, really intense in that I had to learn about a whole other craft.
Yeah.
But really fulfilling, a great team to work with. The one of the special things about that particular library branch is that it sees a lot of newcomer families use
Okay.
it. So there's people from all over the world that access that library services through that branch. And so the lace that I sourced for the drawings and came from all over the world. So
Mm.
lace followed colonization. So like everybody makes lace everywhere in different
Yeah.
ways.
Right.
So I was able to source some different places, as well as at our local museum. There's a collection of lace fragments,
Mm.
probably. So some of those are in there.
Yeah.
Um, and then the leaf canopy, the leaves are come from 10 different types of trees from all over the world,
Okay.
not just our like maple trees and birch trees and oak trees that we have here. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
That's so cool. And then just gives more people more of a chance to recognize something that connects them to their home
Yeah.
and where they come
Yeah.
from. That's really cool. And yeah, I like I said, I've like watched the install videos a million times because I'm just like mesmerized by all the different pieces that come, go into it and how it was brought to life and just the end result is just so stunning. And as a kid, like I could just imagine like yeah, touching the walls and like playing with the lace bookmarks and feel it because like I love texture. I'm sensitive to texture, I should say, because there's some textures polyester batting makes me want to throw up. I'm just gonna put
Oh,
it out there. I can't touch
yeah.
it, which is hard when I have clients that only want to use polyester. And I'm like, okay, I have to like prepare myself to not have a freak out when I touch it. So anyway, but just things like, yeah, tracing my finger through like grooves in wood or touching tree bark. Like I love that kind of texture. So I can just
Mhm.
imagine my like childhood self like being so enamored with that and yeah, just the light coming through the leaves. And how did like so did you have to cut the Tyvek like was it laser cut or was it yeah, how did you
Yeah, so in this particular project, I was part fabricator and part designer, and I did fabricate those leaves.
okay.
I cut them on a Cricut, but like and
Okay.
then stitched them in panels. Like there's I think
Okay.
maybe the max size of my Cricut is like a 12-inch by 24-inch mat.
Yeah.
So then I did each lace panel in like 3 to 6 panels, and then I stitched them together.
Okay.
Actually, I do. So I haven't posted on Instagram for many months. And it's because I have one last video to post about the library project. It was how I put the tie back together. Um, and then I hope I start posting again. Gotten back into the rhythm. I'm just like, okay, I need to like bank all of my library posts together and
Yeah.
then I can move on to other things. Um, so I will make sure that you see that. I'll send that to
Okay.
you so that you
Yeah.
can see how I put the tie back together.
Good. Yeah. it's just always so mind-blowing to me watching, like, public art installations, and, like, my city is, like, all about public art too, and, like, they wrap, like, the electrical boxes that are near, intersections. They, like, take artists like, local artists' art and then use, like, vinyl wraps and wrap the boxes with art, and so there's just, like, all these little places, and especially throughout downtown, and our libraries are art, public art centers too, essentially, and it's just so incredible, and we're just exposed to it so much, and I think if you don't really know to look for it, you're just, like, so unaware, and where you're just like, "Oh, that's cool that they, like, got somebody to put that together," but it's like, "No, this was a person, this came out of one person's brain," like,
Yeah.
and all the work and the time that goes into it, because like you said, you had to learn a whole new craft, you had to learn all about lace to put this concept together, but I think it's, like, so underrated the things that artists and designers and creators do because of all the new things that you have to learn all the time to be able to communicate your ideas through your preferred medium, and it's just
Yeah. It's a
incredible.
privilege to be able to just like explore that
Yeah.
and be like, today I'm gonna read books on lace. Or like
Right?
go to
Yeah.
the library or like just do some internet research on yeah. So and watch YouTube videos on how to make
Right.
like what today? I'm watching YouTube videos on like handmade lace.
Yeah.
Uh yeah. Um yeah, those are the kind of like those projects really tap into something in me that I'm like, oh, I get to learn a new craft. Not fully, but like learn about
Right.
something new. And um it really excites me to be able
Yeah.
to do that. Yeah.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Well, I am just in awe and I love your work. And I'm just so happy that you were able to be with me today and talk about all these things. And I'm excited to, well, I'm now going to get that gemstone book because like I said, it's been like eating away in my brain, like ever since that lady brought it up and she didn't end up getting it. So I'm going to make myself a quilt and your new book. I'm so excited to look for that and just I haven't even read it and it feels like it's already going to resonate with me. So that's really cool and exciting. And so where like will people be able to order your new book on your website or
Yeah.
yeah, where
So for now, on Kickstarter, so we launched a Kickstarter in May to me and the publisher or the publisher to be able to fund the first print run of it.
okay.
Um, and so people did put pre-orders through there.
Okay.
And it's still a live link, so you can still pre-order from that link. And that
Okay.
actually really helps us to be able to boost the numbers for release day. So like all of the pre-orders that have come in
Mhm.
will be the day one sales. So that like pumps it up to like the
Yeah.
charts or whatever. I don't even know how
Okay.
it works, but um, and so they can still pre-order through Kickstarter. And then once the book is available, I'll have it on my website, thirdstoryworkshop.com,
Okay.
to ship for me. But it should be available through all major retailers, come like February, March type thing of next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll send people directly to your website. I'm a big proponent of buying directly
Yeah.
from the designer or the maker. So, great.
Thank you.
And I will put your website in the show notes so people can just click on it and go to you so they don't have to try to figure it out. But yeah, that's really exciting. And
Yeah, we'll have a couple of quick kickoff events at QuiltCon,
okay,
in the vendor hall, when that comes around in February. So yeah,
perfect. Okay, so well, I'll be there, so I'm excited. I'll look for
awesome.
that.
Then I get to meet you in person.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you're teaching at QuiltCon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's so cool. I just saw that and I didn't get into any classes. I'm only there for the Saturday and or Friday and Saturday. So, but that's so cool. So yeah, what are you teaching?
So I will be teaching actually a full day workshop online in quilting.
Okay.
So this kind of work,
Yeah.
a little bit more exploratory to start, and then working in this kind of technique.
Okay.
And then a couple of shorter classes on intro to improv. So we actually kind of using that box technique of like trying something new, but like within the parameters of this like small block.
Okay.
And so if the larger concept of that class is how to start anything new, basically using that kind of container idea.
Hmm.
But it is really kind of centered on improv, and so people can just try it out and
Okay.
not worry about making a whole quilt that's improv. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well,
Mm.
that's so cool. And I'm assuming they're sold out because most classes
They
are.
are, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. I mean, I think that just shows people's eagerness to learn new things and engage with the people that they admire, which I think is what keeps like QuiltCon and other, quilt conventions and things and like market and all that open
Yeah.
because people are interested. So that's really cool and exciting for you and
Yeah.
to be able to kind of bring your new book with you and show that off as well. So that'll be so fun. I'm excited.
Yeah. For myself, I'm not taking any classes, but
Mm,
I got a lecture pass because I do always get so
yeah.
much out of those. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I did too. Cause yeah, it's so fun to just hear other people's stories and other people's perspectives and experiences in quilting and just from all different aspects of it. So yeah, learned so much stuff. That's so fun. Well, I'm excited to meet you in person. That's gonna be so
Yeah.
great.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you
thanks
so much
again.
for having me.
Yeah, this has been so great. And like I said, I'll link your website in the show notes so people can get directly to you and check out all your stuff. And in the meantime, I can't wait to see the video of you putting the tie back together and
Yeah.
and finish your library series of installation. And I just strongly encourage people to go check it out because it's really amazing. But yeah, thanks again.
All right.